They laughed at her during the will reading, but no one was laughing when the lawyer said her name. It started with a silence so heavy you could almost hear it, the kind that makes your chest tighten before anyone even says a word. Naomi Fletcher stood at the foot of a long driveway in Fairfield, Connecticut, staring up at a mansion that looked like something out of a magazine. White columns, polished glass windows, manicured hedges cut to perfection. Everything screamed old money. But to Naomi, it just felt cold. She adjusted the strap of her small purse and took a deep breath. She'd never been here before, never even met most of the people waiting inside, but it didn't matter. Her mother had begged her to come, said her grandfather would have wanted it. Naomi's mother, Renee, had passed away 2 years earlier, and this was all that was left of that side of the family. The side that never came around, never sent cards, never called. But now that her grandfather was gone, they all wanted to play family again. As she reached the front door, "Golly is ours up, y'all." She could already hear voices from inside. Laughter, glasses clinking, the low hum of people catching up like it was a reunion. She hesitated before pressing the doorbell. The door swung open almost instantly. A tall woman in her 40s looked Naomi up and down. Her name tag read, Catherine Dunley. "You must be Naomi, right?" she said, her voice polite but dry. "Yes, ma'am," Naomi replied softly. Well, everyone's already in the living room. Come in." Naomi stepped inside. The air smelled like lemon polish and perfume. Portraits lined the walls, paintings of serious-looking men in suits and women holding pearl necklaces. She could feel their eyes on her. The living room was massive, full of people dressed in black designer clothes. The moment Naomi entered, the laughter died down. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Someone whispered. Someone else snickered. Naomi didn't look up. She just kept walking, clutching the silver bracelet around her wrist, the one her grandfather had given her on her 9th birthday. "Always remember who you are," he'd told her. Those words were the only reason she'd found the courage to come today. She sat quietly at the far end of the couch. Everyone else, her uncles, cousins, and their spouses, stood in small clusters, whispering and watching. A few forced smiles, but mostly stares. A man with slick gray hair leaned over to his wife. "Did you know she was coming?" The woman shrugged. "I thought Renee's side wasn't invited." Naomi heard every word. Her face stayed calm, but her fingers traced the bracelet again and again. She felt like a stranger in a place that should have been family. Moments later, the lawyer, Mr. Benton, walked in, a short man in a navy suit carrying a leather folder. He smiled awkwardly. "All right, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll begin in just a few minutes." The room quieted. Naomi's eyes drifted toward the large portrait above the fireplace. Her grandfather, Henry Fletcher, standing beside a classic black car, proud and tall. She remembered how he used to take her fishing when she was little, before her mother stopped bringing her around. She could almost hear his voice. "Don't let people tell you who you are, Naomi. Show them." But looking around now, surrounded by polished shoes and fake smiles, she wondered if he'd really want her here. Catherine sat nearby, crossing her legs. "So, Naomi," she began, "you came all the way from Baltimore for this?" Naomi nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "That's quite a trip," Catherine said, forcing a smile. "I didn't even know Henry kept in touch with you." "He called me sometimes," Naomi said softly. "Mostly birthdays." The woman's smile faltered just a little. "Well, that's sweet." Naomi could feel the sting beneath those words, like she was being reminded that she didn't belong. But what she didn't know yet was that before this day ended, every single person in that room would look at her differently. The moment the lawyer stepped out of the room to grab a few documents, the tension cracked open. What had been quiet politeness turned into low murmurs and judgmental glances. Naomi tried not to stare, but it was impossible to ignore how every conversation seemed to orbit around her. "She really came," a man said near the fireplace. His voice carried easily. Another woman laughed softly. "Of course she did. Probably thinks there's money in it." A younger cousin, a girl about Naomi's age with a gold bracelet and perfect curls, leaned toward her mother and whispered, "She doesn't even look like family." Naomi heard that too. She shifted in her seat, pretending to check her phone, but her hand trembled. Catherine's husband, Douglas, poured himself a drink and said to no one in particular, "You know, Henry always had a soft spot for lost causes." The room chuckled quietly. Naomi's jaw tightened, but she stayed quiet. She'd learned a long time ago that silence could protect you when words made things worse. Then someone finally addressed her directly. "So, Naomi," a man named Gerald, her grandfather's nephew, began. He was tall and broad, with an expensive watch that gleamed under the chandelier. "How did you even know Grandpa Henry?" Naomi blinked. "He was my grandfather." Gerald smirked. "Right, but I mean, did you ever actually spend time with him?" "We never saw you around." Naomi's voice was soft but steady. "When I was younger, yes. He used to visit my mom before she passed. Renee, right?" he said, snapping his fingers like he was recalling an old memory. "Yeah, she was different." The way he said different felt heavy. Naomi's chest tightened again. Douglas let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll tell you what, Henry must have been feeling generous. I can't imagine what he'd leave behind for a stranger," that drew another round of quiet laughter. Naomi swallowed hard. "I'm not a stranger." Her voice surprised even her, firm, clear. Catherine's eyes flicked toward her, brows raised. "No one said you were, dear." "Yes, you did," Naomi replied, meeting her gaze. For a moment, the room went silent again. The air shifted. Gerald cleared his throat, pretending to rearrange his tie. Just then, the lawyer came back, saving Naomi from the thick silence. He carried a stack of papers and a sealed envelope. "All right, folks," he said, his voice light. "Let's get started, shall we?" Everyone straightened up, pretending they hadn't just been gossiping. But Naomi saw the way they looked at her, the kind of look that made you feel small before you even said a word. She exhaled slowly, telling herself to stay calm. Her grandfather believed in her. He had to. Why else would he ask her to be here? The lawyer cleared his throat again, taking his seat at the center of the room. The fire behind him crackled softly. "We'll begin with a brief message Mr. Fletcher asked me to read before we get into the details." The chatter died instantly. Naomi sat up a little straighter. Mr. Benton unfolded a letter and began. "To my family, if you're hearing this, I've already gone home. I've lived a full life, full of mistakes, lessons, and love. What matters most now isn't what I've left behind, but who I've left it to." A few people smiled, trying to look sentimental. But Naomi felt something twist in her chest. She recognized his handwriting from years ago, those strong loops and neat spacing. He had written this himself. But before the lawyer even reached the second paragraph, one cruel comment would shatter what little peace remained in that room. Mr. Benton adjusted his glasses, his voice calm and professional as he continued reading. "Each of you has played a part in my life," the letter said. "Some of you stood by me. Some of you drifted away. But there's one person who reminded me what it means to love without condition. Someone who never asked for anything, yet gave me peace when I needed it most." The room went still. Naomi felt her throat tighten. She knew who he meant, but she didn't want to believe it yet. Gerald leaned forward, half smiling. "Well, I think we all know who that's about," he muttered. His wife chuckled quietly. "Probably you, dear." "Maybe," he said, smirking. Mr. Benton looked up for a moment. "Please, folks. Let's keep comments to ourselves until the end." He cleared his throat again and moved to the official part of the will. Henry Fletcher's assets include his residence here in Fairfield, several acres of land in Vermont, and his company shares in Fletcher Auto Works, valued at approximately $3.2 million. Eyes widened across the room. Even Naomi felt her stomach drop at the number. Douglas leaned toward Catherine and whispered, "I told you it'd be big." Catherine's smile didn't fade. "Let's see where it goes." The lawyer continued. "To my nephews Gerald and Douglas, I leave each a collection of family heirlooms and my grandfather's gold watch, which I know they admired. To Catherine Dunley, I leave a donation in her name to the Fairfield Public Library." Catherine blinked. "A donation?" she whispered. "In my name?" Douglas bit back a laugh. Mr. Benton shuffled a few pages. "To my close friend, Reverend Miles Turner, I leave $10,000 to continue his community programs." The lawyer paused again, scanning the final section. "And lastly," Naomi could feel every pair of eyes slide toward her. Her palms grew sweaty. Mr. Benton glanced up briefly, as if weighing how to say the next words. "The remainder of the estate, including the Fairfield property, land, financial assets, and business holdings, shall be transferred to—" Before he could finish, Gerald scoffed loudly. "Let me guess." His dog? Laughter broke through the tension. Even the lawyer hesitated. Naomi kept her eyes fixed on the table, heart pounding in her ears. Mr. Benton raised his voice slightly. "Shall be transferred to Naomi Fletcher." The laughter stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy enough to fill the entire room. Catherine blinked. I'm sorry, what did you say?" He repeated it word for word. Henry Fletcher's sole heir to the remainder of his estate is his granddaughter, Naomi Fletcher. Naomi's mouth fell open, just slightly. She didn't move, didn't speak. Gerald was the first to break. "You've got to be kidding me." Douglas slammed his glass down. "That can't be right." Catherine looked at her husband, panic spreading across her face. "There's no way Henry would do that." "No way." Mr. Benton remained calm. "I assure you, this was his final and legally verified will, signed and witnessed 8 months ago." Naomi finally lifted her head. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. "He left it all to me," she said quietly. "Yes," Mr. Benton said. "Everything." The air seemed to disappear from the room. Naomi could see the fury in their faces, the disbelief, the jealousy. Gerald stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous." He didn't even know her like that. "He did," Naomi said suddenly, surprising herself again. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. "He called me every year. He checked on me when my mom got sick. He remembered me when nobody else did." The room was silent. No one dared to move. Douglas muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable. We spend years caring for him, and she waltzes in from nowhere and gets it all." Mr. Benton closed the folder carefully. This was Henry's choice. His words were clear. Catherine crossed her arms tightly. "Well, I don't believe it. I'll contest it if I have to." Naomi didn't respond. Her hands were trembling again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was shock. Her grandfather had trusted her, above all of them. But before she could even process that truth, the real ugliness in that room was about to surface. And this time, it would be directed straight at her. The words, "She gets everything," echoed through the room like an alarm no one could shut off. Catherine was the first to move. She stood up so fast her chair scraped the hardwood floor. "This is absurd," she said, her voice trembling. "Henry wasn't in his right mind when he signed that paper." "He must have been confused." Mr. Benton shook his head. His doctor confirmed full mental clarity at the time. Everything was recorded. "Well, maybe he was pressured," she shot back, eyes narrowing on Naomi. Naomi's stomach twisted. "Pressured? By who?" Catherine folded her arms. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe by someone who realized being his little phone buddy could turn into a payday." A few people gasped softly. Naomi blinked, stunned. "I never asked him for anything," she said. "Not once." Gerald let out a short, bitter laugh. "Sure. People like you always say that. People like me?" she repeated. He hesitated, but didn't back down. "You show up after years of silence, and now you're walking out of here a millionaire. You tell me what that looks like." Naomi could feel the heat rising in her chest. "It looks like he trusted me." That's all Douglas scoffed. "Trust? Please. He built this empire from nothing, and you think he'd hand it all to some girl who barely knew him?" "I knew him," she snapped back, her voice cracking slightly. "He used to call me his little storm. He said I reminded him of himself when he was young, quiet but strong. You wouldn't know that, because none of you ever listened to him unless money was involved." The room went dead silent. Catherine clenched her jaw. "You're being disrespectful." "No," Naomi said firmly. "I'm being honest." Douglas pointed at the lawyer. "I want to see that will myself. There's no way she's getting all of it." "Maybe there's a mistake," Mr. Benton sighed. "There's no mistake, sir. I drafted it myself." Gerald laughed bitterly. "Unbelievable. All those years we spent helping him with the business, running errands, keeping his estate in shape. And she gets to sit back and take the reward?" Naomi looked around the room, at all the angry faces twisted by greed and disbelief. "You didn't do those things for him," she said quietly. "You did them for what you thought he'd give you." Catherine stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. "You listen to me, young lady," she hissed. "That money doesn't belong to you. It belongs to this family." Naomi's voice didn't waver. I am his family. For a moment, Catherine didn't speak. Her face flushed red, and she turned away sharply, muttering, "This is ridiculous." I refused to sit here and watch the circus. Douglas followed her, but Gerald stayed, his stare heavy and full of bitterness. "You'll regret this," he said under his breath. "You think that money will make you one of us?" "It won't. It never will." Naomi didn't flinch. "Good," she said softly. "I don't want to be one of you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Gerald's jaw tightened before he turned and stormed off toward the hallway. Naomi sank back into her seat, her hands shaking slightly. She wasn't sure whether to cry or run. The lawyer approached quietly and placed a hand on the table. "Miss Fletcher," he said gently, "you don't need to stay any longer. Everything will be handled through me." She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." She could feel dozens of eyes on her as she stood, none of them with kindness. Some were angry, others calculating, and one or two looked like they might actually pity her. But Naomi didn't need their pity. She turned toward the door, the silver bracelet glinting under the chandelier's light. For the first time, she realized what her grandfather had done. He'd given her more than money. He'd given her freedom. But just when she thought it was over, one last person stopped her, someone who wasn't ready to let her leave quietly. Naomi had barely reached the foyer when a voice called after her, "Naomi!" "Wait." She turned to see Gerald striding toward her, face tight, eyes sharp. The lawyer stayed behind, pretending to check his papers, but everyone else had fallen silent, watching. Gerald stopped just a few feet away. "You really think walking out makes you look strong? You think you deserve this?" Naomi met his gaze. "It's not about deserving it. It's about what he wanted." He laughed bitterly. "What he wanted? You think my uncle, the man who built everything here, wanted you to inherit it all, over his own blood?" Naomi's voice was calm, but there was steel in it now. "I am his blood." He shook his head, sneering. "You really think he saw you that way?" Mr. Benton cleared his throat from across the room. "Mr. Fletcher, I'd advise you not to speak further if you're upset." "Upset?" Gerald snapped. "You're damn right I'm upset. This girl shows up out of nowhere, barely even related to us. And suddenly she owns everything my uncle worked for?" Naomi's hands balled into fists. "I'm not barely related. I'm his granddaughter. My mom was his daughter." Gerald's voice lowered, venomous. "Your mother was his mistake." The room gasped. Someone whispered, "Gerald!" But it was too late. The words hung there, raw and ugly. Naomi stared at him, stunned. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Gerald stepped closer. He spent years trying to make up for what she did, running off, embarrassing the family name, dragging us through rumors, and now you're his way of washing his guilt clean. Her heart pounded. "That's not true," he smirked. "Oh, it's true. You're the living reminder of what he never wanted to admit, that he had a whole other family he hid from everyone here, and now, somehow, you're supposed to take all this?" Mr. Benton stood. "That's enough, Mr. Fletcher." But Gerald ignored him. "You think sitting there quiet makes you better than us? You think you're some symbol of goodness? You're nothing but a charity case with a lucky name." Naomi's eyes glistened, but she refused to look away. "You can say whatever you want," she said softly, "but he didn't see me that way. He called me every birthday, every Christmas. He didn't have to, but he did. You can't fake that. He cared." For a second, Gerald's face twitched. Something like guilt flickered and vanished. "He was confused," he said quickly. "Old and sentimental." Naomi shook her head. "No." He was finally seeing clearly. Catherine, who'd been watching from the doorway, spoke for the first time in a while. "Gerald, stop it. You're embarrassing yourself." He turned toward her. "Embarrassing myself? She just stole everything." Catherine exhaled sharply. "She didn't steal anything. You heard the lawyer. It was his choice." Gerald glared at her, but she didn't back down. "Henry made mistakes, yes. We all know that. But maybe he saw something in her that the rest of us refused to see." The room went silent again. Naomi looked at Catherine, surprised. There was something softer in the woman's face now, like the anger had burned away and left only confusion and shame. Catherine sighed. "He used to talk about you, you know. Not much, but enough that I remember. He said you had your mother's heart. Naomi swallowed. He said that? Catherine nodded slowly. He did. Gerald scoffed and stormed off toward the back patio, muttering under his breath. The others pretended not to watch. Naomi stood there, frozen for a moment, trying to take it all in. The noise, the anger, the disbelief. It all felt far away now. Mr. Benton approached quietly. Miss Fletcher, he said gently, there's one more thing your grandfather asked me to give you. He handed her a small, sealed envelope. Her name, Naomi, was written in that same neat, familiar handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a folded letter and a photo, her, at maybe 8 years old, sitting on her grandfather's lap at a fishing pier, both of them smiling. She began to read. My dearest Naomi, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I know today won't be easy, and I know some won't be kind to you, but I want you to remember something. This family was built on pride, and pride can blind people. Don't let it blind you. What I'm leaving you isn't just money. It's a chance to make something right. You have my heart and my name. Use them well. Don't hate them for how they treat you. They only know what they were taught. Be better than that. Love, Grandpa. Henry. Naomi folded the letter carefully, pressing it against her chest. The lawyer looked at her kindly. He was proud of you, you know. He told me that the day he signed the papers, Naomi nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I believe that. But outside that house, the real world was waiting, and not everyone was ready to accept that the girl they mocked was now the one in control. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind Naomi as she stepped out into the cold afternoon air. The sky hung low, gray and heavy, like the house itself was casting a shadow over her. She paused at the edge of the stone steps, clutching the letter to her chest. For a brief moment, she thought about her mother, how proud she would have been, how she would have told Naomi not to let those people get under her skin. But before she could even take a breath of relief, the door burst open again. It was Douglas, his voice booming. Hey! Naomi turned slowly. He was followed by Catherine, her arms crossed tight over her chest. Behind them, Gerald lingered near the doorway, pacing like a man about to explode. Douglas walked down the steps toward her. You think this is over? He said. You think you can just walk away with everything and leave us standing here? Naomi frowned. I didn't take anything from you. You took everything, he snapped. That land, the house, the company, everything Henry built with his family. Naomi took a step back, her voice calm but firm. He was my family too. Barely, Douglas spat. Your mother walked out on him, remember? Left him humiliated. And now her daughter gets to wear the crown? Catherine stepped forward. Douglas, stop. No, he said, eyes burning. She needs to hear it. She thinks that bracelet makes her part of us. That's a piece of silver, not a bloodline. Naomi swallowed hard. I didn't ask for any of this. Douglas shook his head, laughing bitterly. Oh, you don't have to ask. People like you never do. You just wait for someone else to hand it to you. Naomi's voice rose suddenly. People like me? You mean someone who wasn't invited until money was involved? Someone who didn't fit your picture of what this family's supposed to look like? Douglas froze, his jaw tight. The silence between them said what no one else wanted to admit. Catherine finally spoke again, her tone quieter this time. Douglas, that's enough. You're making it worse. Naomi turned to leave, but Catherine's voice stopped her. Naomi. Naomi hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. Catherine took a slow breath. I'm sorry for what was said in there, for what we said. You didn't deserve that. Douglas looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Catherine, don't, she snapped. Henry trusted her. That means something. For the first time, Naomi saw sincerity in Catherine's face. Not pity, understanding. Naomi nodded slightly. Thank you, she said softly. Catherine stepped closer. I don't expect forgiveness. But if you ever need help managing the estate or the company, I can show you where things are. Henry would have wanted someone to guide you. Naomi looked at her for a long moment. Maybe, but I think he wanted me to figure it out on my own first. Catherine smiled faintly. He always did like to test people. Douglas huffed, muttering under his breath as he walked away. Gerald still stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching everything like a storm cloud that hadn't moved on yet. As Naomi turned to head down the driveway, she heard him call out, "You think you've won, don't you?" She stopped but didn't turn around. Gerald's voice echoed, "You'll see. That money won't make anyone love you. It won't fill the space your mother left. It'll just make people come around for all the wrong reasons." Naomi closed her eyes. "Then I guess I'll just have to be careful who I let close." And with that, she walked away. Her boots crunched against the gravel as she reached the gate, her heart heavy but steady. The world beyond the mansion felt different now. It wasn't brighter, but it was hers. A car honked softly, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Mr. Benton, pulling up beside her. He rolled down the window. "Need a ride back to the station?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Yeah, thanks." As the car drove off, she watched the estate disappear in the rearview mirror. The pillars, the walls, the people, they all grew smaller until they were gone. Mr. Benton glanced at her. "You handled yourself well in there. Not many people your age could have." Naomi shrugged slightly. "I just, didn't want to give them what they wanted." "And what's that?" he asked. "For me to break," she said quietly. He nodded. "Your grandfather would have been proud." Naomi smiled faintly, staring out the window as raindrops began to hit the glass. "I think he already was." But even with the weight lifted, Naomi knew the hardest part wasn't behind her. It was what came next. What she'd do with everything he left her, and whether she could prove she was worthy of the faith he'd placed in her. 2 weeks later, Naomi stood on the front steps of the same mansion. Only this time, it was quiet. The whispers, the anger, the laughter that once filled the halls had all faded. The estate was hers now, legally transferred and signed. Every key, every deed, every share of Fletcher Auto Works belonged to her. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like responsibility. She turned the old brass key in her hand, staring at the engraved initials, H. Her grandfather's touch was still everywhere. His books in the study, his worn leather chair by the window, his scent faintly clinging to the hallways. Inside, sunlight spilled across the polished floors. For the first time, Naomi walked through the rooms without anyone watching her. No eyes judging, no whispers waiting to trip her up. Just quiet. She wandered through the house slowly, past the framed newspaper clippings of her grandfather, shaking hands with city officials, past the grand piano her mother used to play when she was a teenager, past the photo wall where Henry's life had been frozen in time, each smile, each milestone. She stopped in front of one picture in particular, her mother Renee, standing beside her father at a picnic, holding baby Naomi. Her grandfather stood in the background, not smiling, but watching, like a man who wanted to be close, but didn't know how. Naomi touched the glass. "You did your best, didn't you?" she whispered. The house was silent, but in that silence, she felt him, the warmth of his memory. Downstairs, Mr. Benton waited with a small folder. "All the transfers are done," he said kindly. "You're officially the owner now." Naomi smiled politely. "Thank you." He hesitated. "You planning to live here?" Naomi looked around the enormous space. "Maybe not. Not yet." He nodded. "Fair. A house this big can feel empty when you're alone." "Yeah," she said quietly. "It already does." He handed her one more envelope before leaving. "This was found in the study drawer. It's addressed to you." After he left, Naomi sat down at the large oak table and opened it. Inside was a note written in her grandfather's familiar handwriting. "Naomi, if you've come this far, I know you've seen the worst of them, and maybe the best too. Don't let this house turn into another cage. Use what I've given you to build something real, something that helps others the way you helped me remember who I was. I trust you, Grandpa." Naomi let out a shaky laugh. "Always leaving me puzzles, huh?" She walked out onto the porch, the wind moving through the trees. The long driveway that had once felt like a walk of shame now looked like a path to something new. Her phone buzzed. It was Catherine. Naomi hesitated before answering. "Hello?" Catherine's voice was calm. "I just wanted to check in. Make sure you're doing all right." "I'm okay," Naomi said, still trying to figure out what comes next. "Well," Catherine said softly, "if you ever need advice or company, I'm around. Maybe we can start over." Naomi smiled faintly. "I'd like that." They talked for a few more minutes, awkward at first, but genuine. When Naomi hung up, she sat there a while longer, letting the breeze wash over her. The bracelet on her wrist gleamed in the sunlight. That small piece of silver had outlasted the whispers, the anger, and the greed. It was more than jewelry now. It was a reminder that she'd survived something that was meant to break her. She stood, tucking her grandfather's letter into her jacket pocket. "All right, Grandpa," she whispered. "Let's see what I can make of this." Then she turned toward the road, her steps steady, her head high. But as she walked away, she didn't carry the weight of wealth or guilt, just a quiet promise to honor what he'd seen in her all along: strength, grace, and the courage to begin again. Weeks later, the mansion no longer felt like a battlefield. It had turned into something quieter, a place of memories instead of resentment. Naomi had cleared out most of her grandfather's old belongings, donating many to charity. The air inside was lighter now, like the house itself could finally breathe again. In his old study, she'd turned the desk into her own workspace. The same surface where the will had been signed now held a notebook filled with her plans: scholarships for kids who couldn't afford college, a mentorship program for single mothers, a foundation named after her mother, the Renee Fletcher Fund. She wasn't using the money to prove anything. She was using it to do something. One afternoon, she stood outside the auto shop her grandfather had owned, now renamed Fletcher and Future Works. The new sign shimmered in the sunlight. Workers waved as she passed, and one older man, a mechanic who'd known Henry for decades, called out, "He'd be proud of what you're doing, miss." Naomi smiled. "I hope so." She walked through the lot, the hum of tools and conversation filling the air. For the first time in a long time, she felt grounded. Not because she had wealth or power, but because she finally had purpose. Later that evening, Naomi sat on the back porch, her feet tucked under her, the last orange glow of sunset fading over the trees. She took out her grandfather's final letter again. The words had faded slightly at the creases, but their meaning hadn't changed. He'd trusted her to be better, to rise above bitterness, to be the kind of person who built bridges where others built walls. She thought of Gerald and Douglas, how neither had spoken to her since the will reading. She didn't hate them. She didn't need to. People reveal who they are when life doesn't go their way, and sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about setting yourself free. Naomi whispered to the quiet evening, "Thank you, Grandpa," for seeing me when they wouldn't. She slipped the bracelet off her wrist, holding it up to the fading light. The tiny silver piece caught the last bit of sun, a final sparkle before dusk. Then she smiled. Time to make it count. She placed the bracelet back on, not as a memory of what she'd been through, but as a reminder of what she could still become. Because sometimes, the ones who are underestimated the most are the ones who end up changing everything. Naomi wasn't just an heir. She was proof that strength doesn't come from where you start, but from how you choose to carry what life gives you. And as she closed her notebook, she spoke the words she wished someone had said to her years ago. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for where you come from. You belong in every room you walk into. If you've ever been in Naomi's shoes, looked down on, doubted, or dismissed, remember this. Your value isn't defined by anyone's approval. It's defined by your resilience, your kindness, and the way you rise above. Don't wait for someone else to hand you worth. You already have it. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear that being overlooked doesn't mean being powerless. Because sometimes, the quietest people in the room have the loudest destinies.